Imagine a world without oil. We would still be riding horses instead of driving cars, using fish oil lamps instead of electric lights, and wars would revolve around swords and handguns. Since its discovery in the 19th century, oil has not only been a fuel source, but has also changed the face of the world economically, politically, and geographically. But the problem is that this gift from the earth is not endless. And the question, when will oil run out, has made many countries lose sleep. So in our world, when will oil really run out? Back in 1859, Edwin Drake drilled the first oil well in the United States. Initially, oil was used to replace whale oil for lighting. But when the first cars appeared in the early 20th century, oil immediately became the lifeblood of industry. Then World War I and World War II broke out, and oil proved its strategic role. Whoever had the most oil won. Hitler during World War II tried every way to control oil in the Middle East and the Kafka region, a hot spot for the Soviet Union at that time. Unfortunately, the Soviet Union had secured the oil fields in Baku, while the Allies were taking full advantage of oil from the United States and the Middle East. A more obvious example is that tanks, planes, and warships all need oil to operate. Without oil, the army is like a lost colony of ants. Oil is not scattered everywhere, but concentrated in a few oil resource areas. The Middle East is the heart of the world's oil, accounting for 48% of global reserves. Countries such as Saudi Arabia, Iran, Iraq, and Kuwait are the giants in this field. Every time they sneeze, world oil prices jump. Further north, Russia is also an oil powerhouse. Its oil fields in Siberia and the Caspian Sea are not only huge, but also extremely difficult to exploit due to harsh weather conditions. In the United States, Venezuela is home to the largest oil reserves in the world. But poor management and political turmoil have plunged the country into a severe economic crisis. And in a country rich in oil, people still lack gasoline. In Southeast Asia, oil is found in Brunei, Indonesia, and Malaysia. The question is, when will the oil run out? This is a very difficult question to answer. Currently, the world has about 1.6 trillion barrels of proven oil, that is, found and exploitable with current technology. If technology develops further and oil is found or exploited in deeper places, then perhaps the number will be much higher. If we keep up the consumption of 100 million barrels a day, we have about 40 to 50 years before we run out. But exhaustion here does not mean that oil disappears completely, but that the cost of extraction is too high, no longer economically efficient. However, the time when oil runs out depends on many factors. First is extraction technology. New extraction technologies, such as shale oil extraction in the US, have increased the available reserves. For example, the US used to be heavily dependent on imported oil, but now it has become an oil exporter thanks to shale oil. It is true that in difficult times, people always have a way to show their intelligence. Secondly, there is the demand for consumption. That is, if the world switches to renewable energy, such as solar power, wind power, or electric cars, the demand for oil will also decrease significantly. And third is the political and economic factor. Oil prices also have a big impact on the speed of extraction. If oil prices are high, difficult to exploit oil fields like the Canadian oil sands will also become more attractive. In the big picture, many countries have grown rich thanks to oil, but not all have used this resource wisely. Venezuela is a bitter lesson. With large and globally leading oil reserves, Venezuela was once very rich. But when oil prices fell, the economy that was completely dependent on oil collapsed, leaving people with food and medicine shortages. In contrast, in Europe, Norway is a model. They used oil profits to create a sovereign wealth fund, now worth more than $1.4 trillion, to secure the future for future generations. Countries like Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates are not only dependent on oil, but are also investing heavily in tourism, technology, and renewable energy. Dubai, part of the United Arab Emirates, is now known for its more spectacular structures than one might imagine when it comes to oil. So we have an answer to the question of when oil will run out at current extraction technology, which is about half a century. But is running out of oil really that scary? And what is the world preparing for? Running out of oil sounds scary, but in fact, the world is already preparing for an oil-free future. Electric cars are becoming more popular. China, one of the world's largest electric vehicle markets, sold more than 6 million electric vehicles in 2023. New technologies such as hydrogen are also being researched to replace oil in heavy industry. Iceland, a country with no oil, has proven that living without oil is completely possible. With its geothermal and hydroelectric power, Iceland is not only self-sufficient in electricity, but also exports it to European countries. So the world now has examples of people no longer completely dependent on oil, but looking for new sources of energy to replace it. But the story is not as simple as switching from oil to batteries or wind. Each alternative candidate has its own story. The sun is the first to come to mind, an endless source of energy that is, of course, completely free. It is emerging as a strong candidate to replace oil. Did you know that in just 1 hour, the Earth receives enough energy from the sun to meet all of humanity's electricity needs for an entire year? Solar panels are no longer a novelty. From rooftops of major cities to giant energy fields, such as the North Solar Plant in Morocco, which is the size of more than 3,000 football fields. However, the sun also has its bad days when it rains or at night. So where does the solar energy come from? That is why countries like Germany and China are investing heavily in energy storage technology. Simply put, if you shine a lot during the day, it will accumulate and be used both day and night. The future may not just be solar panels on a roof, but also a storage system that can power a large system. Then there is wind, which is also completely free. If you have heard of wind farms in Europe, you will see wind turbines like giant propellers, not only beautiful, but also generate clean electricity. And it is a completely free bank. But not all places are as blessed by nature as the central region of our country or wind farms in many other places. In areas with little wind or large turbines that take up too much space, wind energy is still limited. Next up is the hydrogen battery. Hydrogen is often thought of as a highly flammable gas, but when controlled, it can be a very powerful energy source. Hydrogen fuel cells work by combining hydrogen and oxygen. Japan, a country without oil, is at the forefront of this technology. Oil may run out, but one thing that remains is nuclear power. A nuclear plant can provide continuous electricity for many years with high efficiency and no CO2 emissions. France, a pioneer in the field, relies on nuclear power for 70% of its energy. But accidents like Chernobyl in 1986 or Fukushima in 2011 are big trees that haunt the industry. Radioactive waste takes thousands of years to decompose, and the risk of leakage is always present. Still, with ever-improving safety technology, nuclear remains a viable option in the global energy landscape. In short, imagine a world without the roar of gasoline engines, just the smooth ride of electric cars. There are some countries leading the way, like Norway, and China is catching up. To support electric vehicles, battery technology is advancing. Lithium batteries, for example, are not only efficient at storing energy, but are also becoming increasingly compact. Countries like China and the US are investing in battery recycling to reduce waste from manufacturing. The oil will run out, but the world is preparing for it. From sunlight and wind farms to hydrogen and nuclear power, humanity is poised to enter a new energy era. This story is not just about technology, but also about changes in the way we live. One day, oil will run out, but people will still have to live, and the earth will still have to turn. And who knows, the world we leave to our children will be much cleaner and greener. Thanks for your interest in this story.